Welcome to the Liberty Insider. This is a program designed to bring you up-to-date news, information, analysis, and insights on religious liberty developments in the US and around the world. My name is Lincoln Steed, editor of Liberty Magazine, a magazine of over 100 years focus on religious freedom with an emphasis on separation of church and state. My guest on the program is John Ashmeade, attorney John Ashmeade, and your position is, apart from a lawyer and in private employment, you work with the Seventh-day Adventist Church as Associate Director of Public Affairs and Religious Liberty for the Eastern Seaboard, basically, of the United States. The Atlantic Union, we call it within our system.
That's correct.
The world that we live in is increasingly complicated, and nobody has all the answers on any topic. But we all want to know as human beings. We're inquiring, and I think it's worth you and I discussing what is commonly known as conspiracy theories.
Yes.
But basically, these are folk explanations to complicated issues. That's
Right.
I've never heard that description, but that's how I would describe it.
Right.
But thinking on the Christian model, which of course religious liberty was Christians, we hark back to Christ and then the creation of man as a free will agent, the right to choose right or wrong. But in the Christian context, it seems to me one of the first conspiracies was a story told when Jesus was raised from the dead, remember?
Right.
The authorities spread a tale that he'd been stolen by his disciples and so on, and so the stories were bouncing around. What had happened to him? How had he risen? And to this day, a lot of the the critics of Christianity sort of go back to that basic conspiracy.
Sure.
So, you know, what's your take on the things that are free floating around us today? Conspiracies in the political world, in the scientific world. I've joked with you privately about the flat earth theory. There are a lot of proponents to that nowadays.
Right.
There are conspiracy theories that involve space aliens, and certain newspapers on the stands, I know, often had pictures of space aliens with the current president, not our current, but I mean every president that was then current.
Sure.
You know, do we just dismiss these as the ravings of ill-informed, slightly deranged people, or you know, what's going on?
Sure. You know, my very first encounter with conspiracy theories took place a few years ago. I was actually at church, and there was an announcement that, you know, the young people in our church would be putting on a program on prophecy. And, you know, I said to myself, well, I can't miss this. And, you know, when I went to the AY program, and the title of the presentation was Obama and the New World Order. And, you know, that was shocking to me. You know, like many African Americans, I was overjoyed at the election of the first African American president. And so to see him depicted in such negative terms so early in office was really troubling to me. But basically what was done was they had cobbled together a number of videos from YouTube and different places on the internet and painted a picture of the president as part of a secret organization that was seeking to create a one-world government. And so we were on the verge of a one-world government with our newly elected African-American president. And that was deeply disturbing to me. And as I, you know, looked at that program, I decided to investigate the issue further, and, you know, found an overwhelming number of videos on YouTube online on conspiracies, not only involving Obama, but almost every president.
Yeah.
And, you know, and no real, you know, we have no real ability to assess what's true and what's not true, because it's just online.
And this
no
is
vetting.
what bothers me about conspiracies. Right. You know, the greatest conspiracies that's linked, that is slightly linked to reality, are the ongoing discussions about how and who and why and you know, all the details about Kennedy's assassination.
Right.
And the irony is that I've thought it many times, it's not impossible that one of these sites or one of the investigators has stumbled on the truth, but by the nature of conspiracy theories, you can't prove the stuff.
Right.
It's free-floating information. You wouldn't even know if you stumbled on the truth. Right. So it's a little pointless.
I mean, yeah, the problem that I see is just the sources. where you're getting the information. How reliable is the person who's reporting the information? A lot of times they cite to books, but then who was the author of this book? Does the author have any expertise? They cover a broad range of issues from history to science to philosophy to political science, and more often than not, these people just don't have the educational credentials to make the arguments that they're making.
But some conspiracy theories, in fact, a lot of them, are somewhat based in fact, but then people launch out into the unknown.
Right.
And on this new age, new world order, certain facts. I'm sure you remember George Bush Sr. Actually saying publicly that we were heading into a new world order.
Right. Right.
And most recently, Pope Francis, quoted in newspapers in Europe, didn't seem to come this side of the channel. He was frustrated with what the US was up to at the time, and he said, the sooner the US comes under global governance, the better.
Right, right.
So global governance must be an idea that's floating around with certain of these planners.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the same as the New World Order, which is a shadowy movement of people you don't know about, but seem to be able to pull all the strings in history. And yes, you and I, being somewhat familiar with history, you know that even a Napoleon can't pull all the strings to their satisfaction, much less this massive conspiracy.
Right.
And it's almost a superstition often to ascribe great power and influence to these invisible forces.
Right. There's always this secret cabal, this secret group that's wielding all the power behind the scenes and making all the decisions, determining who becomes president, all of those kinds of things. And it seems almost incredible. It really raises the question of, well, why do we even vote in our elections? Is this really a mirage? And that's the real danger of these conspiracy theories, is that it can create a scenario where people are no longer engaged in the process because they believe it's fixed. So that's the real danger, and we're seeing more of these theories proliferate around us, and we need to begin to make some comments about them. Even within the Adventist Church, we have a few of our own. We have our own unique perspective on how things will unfold at the end of time.
Well, too, that I think you and I have spoken about privately. There's an individual within our church who spreads very good information on many, many topics, and two of them just offend me greatly. Islam is supposedly, according to this man, a purposely made organization by the Roman Catholic Church to as sort of a stalking horse for their own interests.
Right.
The known facts of history go against such a thing.
Right.
And then another one is that the whole Masonic order, again, was cooked up out of nowhere to suit Roman Catholic interests.
Right.
Flies against the most simple acts of history, their persecution of the Masonic orders, complicated, of course, by the fact that there have been Masons within the Roman structure, but there were even Masons in early Adventism, and our co-founder Ellen White had to deal very directly with that and say to the pastors, a Christian pastor shouldn't be a member of this secret society. We know secret societies exist, but by and large they're the guys that ride little motorized scooters in public parades and have nice drinking weekends.
But I think you make a very good point. The fact that you could say the Roman Catholic Church is aligned with the Illuminati or Freemasons, and then on top of that, you're going to say that many movie stars and singers, they're also part of this group, and they've all aligned to create one global system that's going to dominate us. I think it's incredible, and it really ignores history. It ignores how this country functions, and it just doesn't really make a lot of sense when you pull back the curtain and you begin to examine the details of what's really being shared.
I agree with you, and you've touched on something that is worth mentioning here because it is significant. You can go online and you can see endless videos public figures, entertainers mostly, and others in the US, with all sorts of Kabbalistic, New Age, spiritualistic, I'm purposely about to give one, but I shouldn't, signs. That's real enough. I think there's a certain trendiness of evil where they want to be in the in-group to show that they know the secret symbols. But I don't think they're directly part of some grand conspiracy at all. It's just evil writ large in the world, from a Christian base. I see that.
A classic example of what you will see in a video is you will have one president and he'll put up a little hand signal, and then they show another image of another president doing it, and so forth. And then all of a sudden, because someone has put up a hand sign, and no context is given, you have this grand conspiracy. They're all aligned. They're all in the same group with the same agenda, and towards global government. And as an Adventist, I think that runs counter to what we believe will happen at the end of time. And I think that's important for our church not to embrace these kinds of views. We don't believe in global government. We actually believe in separation and tension and conflict towards the end of time. And that really is the order, rather than a coming together under one global system.
Well, it may not be a single global government, but there is a coalition where the kings of the earth give over their power for a season to a grand system, which might or might not be the US itself. But and this is the thing with these conspiracies, they're not totally just plucked out of thin air. They're sort of funhouse mirror versions of truth. And then made more complicated. This is the irony. The people that get into conspiracies, I think many of them want to uncover truth and find the meaning behind stuff, but they actually complicate life. They're throwing in layer after layer of conspiracy and complication to what, if you look at it simply, and I think I alluded to it earlier, President Eisenhower warned the country about military-industrial complex. That's real enough. But then if you sort of mix it with a globalist view and the Bilderberg group, and behind closed doors these great power brokers are manipulating. I mean, I think the evidence is greater that the kings of the earth and the business leaders are more and more perplexed about how to control stuff. They're losing control, not gaining it.
I mean, the question is always, to me, you know, the groups that they've pulled together to say that they're all working together, are they really working together? You know, is Jay-Z aligned with the Catholic Church? Or is Rihanna aligned with Muslims? No. Or they're not working, they don't have the same agenda. And that's really the problem. We just throw things together, and we put music behind it in a video. It's scary music in a video, and all of a sudden we have this grand theory that kind of governs the world. And I think it's just not based in reality.
We need to warn against it. And I think another enabling factor in conspiracy theories is they're often people who are not well informed generally. They might be well informed on the conspiracy, supposedly, but if you're observant with things that go on, if you have studied the backdrop, history, or know the political background, things are a lot more self-evident. It takes a lot of the mystery out of things. You're not so inclined toward what we correctly call a conspiracy. I mean, some people dismiss you know, a real explanation of events. Oh, you're just a conspiracist. But it may be very true. So we need to be careful so we don't just run away from someone using the term lightly. That I think is a good point to make. Stay with us on this conspiratorial program. But we're looking at it honestly, as honestly as we can, because it bears on religious liberty. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to the Liberty Insider, and before the break with guest John Ashmeade, we were having a fine old time talking about conspiracy theories and debunking them, at least in theory. But they're not going to go away that easy, either on the internet or even within our church structure. In particular, we're both Seventh-day Adventists. You know, it's worth remembering Jesus said that there'll be false Christs and people say go out into the desert and he's not there. He was talking about conspiracy theories and delusions and false information.
Right.
And this is closely tied up, I believe, with what the president has spoken with his own agenda on it, you know, fake news.
Right.
Not everything that passes for information is really true, is it?
So, you know, I think that as Adventists, because these are the people I'm primarily concerned with, you know, we can outline a framework from which to assess these issues. You know, we have an understanding of the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 talks about 4 great world empires, and the next empire that follows is what? Is the kingdom of God, right?
No.
You have the 4 world empires, and you have the 4th breaking down into 10,
which is an imperfect union of many empires.
Which is conflict.
That's where we are,
right? And so it goes from the 4 world empires to the breaking down into 10, and the representing clay and iron, and then following that we don't see
God's kingdom, an everlasting
we see God's kingdom
stone.
coming in. That's the basic framework that we examine these issues. So there are 4 world empires, and then the kingdom of God. We don't have a 5th world empire that's mentioned. And we see the pattern followed in Daniel chapter 7. And even when we go to Revelation chapter 12 and 13, we see the similar pattern. And so if we examine the issues from that framework, we know automatically there isn't a coming world empire. That's the foundation. And so I think as Adventists we follow that, we can steer clear of all the crazy ideas floating out there about, you know, a global government that is either going to be run by the communists or either run by the Muslim. I don't know. It changes. Or the atheists. They're coming up with their own system. You know, we know that at the end of time there will be an uptick in religious fervor. And, you know, the challenges that we face will be largely driven by Christians who will...
At least in the Christian world.
In the Christian world, who will begin, you know, reinterpreting our Constitution and, you know, trying to break down that wall between the separation of church and state.
Yeah. So in other words, the present writ large, because we're already there, that there are... We've had public officials even saying lately they don't believe in the separation of church and state.
Right.
Many religious leaders say the same thing. They want special treatment for their version of religion.
Right.
But we're only at the beginning stages of that. But the Bible predicts basically religious compulsion writ large throughout what amounts to Christendom.
Right. And you know, we can't ignore this phenomenon of fake news that has really come out. You know, we no longer have a sense of what's true and what isn't. As long as it sort of fits within a framework of our thinking, we run with a story without vetting it. If a negative story comes out about the party that we don't agree with, we just accept it, post it, and our friends like it, and they believe it. And we don't think, is this really the case? We don't go back, you know, and check online to see if this is true. You know, I liken it to the fact, you know, these fake celebrity obituaries come out from time to time, and before you know it, someone's posted that this person is dead, and then you go online, you don't see anything about it, 24 hours elapse, and you realize that this is fake. We need to do a better job of vetting.
You immediately remind me of Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. He says, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Because as I remember, it was reported once or twice that he'd died. And we're caught in a bind in the modern world. In self-congratulatory mode, much is often made of a lot of information, and young people know more than before. There might be information floating around. The certitudes of the past are gone, and it's hard to prove that what you know is true. Plus, I think the digital age has brought an intellectual laziness. I don't believe that people really know as much in their own head as they did before. They have access to it. But then when you go floating out, especially on the internet, it's not plain unless you do a little investigation. You know, one thing displays as good as another. In fact, sometimes the most untrue things display better. They appear more spectacularly real than just boring, hard information.
I mean,
and the Bible says, doesn't it? Even the very elect will be deceived in this age.
Exactly. That's the problem. And when you look at what's taking place in our country, real information can come out, but because it is unflattering of a party that we don't agree with, we reject it out of hand as a political attack of the other side. Yeah. And we don't have a news source that we find reliable, and that's a real problem. And so we really don't know what's going on. We can't tell truth from error.
Let me run two things by you. We're going to run out of time eventually. What do you, in context of this discussion on conspiracy theories, where does the Russian manipulation of our election come in?
Right. Wow. I think I want to wait until I see the Mueller's report.
Very good answer. You need to run for public office.
To offer any firm conclusions. Obviously, as someone living in this country, I've been on the internet and I've been on Facebook and social media, and I've seen things there that I just find incredible. Things published about our current president, things published about Hillary Clinton that I know to be not true, but I see so many people around me embracing them and accepting them and running with them. And I'm sort of a gadfly. Whenever I see it, I like to challenge and poke and say, where did you get this? How did you come to this conclusion? True. And because I think that's what we need to do. But I have real questions about how people came to their decisions in terms of who to vote for based on the information they got from the internet. That's a real problem. But I just don't know what the Russians were able to do until I see some sort of official report.
Yeah, and it doesn't have a lot directly to do with religious liberty, but it has a lot to do with discerning between truth and error. Right. And when your religious faith is compromised, you need to know the basis for it, or else you won't know the compromise.
Right. Here's how this really presents a threat to religious freedom and to liberty in general. If we're able to slander a group or a person by just posting fake news about them, it makes it so much easier to persecute them, and that's a real problem. If something bad happens with the Adventist church and then someone takes that story and they're able to manipulate it in a way to make the church look even worse, then we become a pariah to society.
Well, you're getting to the second point I was going to make.
Okay. We're thinking alike. That's good.
And I was listening to a radio program the other day. I listened to many different religious groups. This particular one related to it was from a Roman Catholic point of view, and they were giving good Bible answers to things. And one of their callers said that a Seventh-day Adventist that they were familiar with had made a claim that there were only so many souls made originally by God, and he was just providing bodies for them, that God had limited himself. Right. And of course they dismissed that and poo-hooed it. To me that was fake news. Right. Adventists don't believe such a thing. Right. I don't know who made it up. I don't think the program did. It's possible the person that called in had an agenda and was misrepresenting. It's possible it was just a plain misunderstanding, but the net effect was clearly both fake news and leading to a conspiracist view of our church.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, if we go back to an early discussion we had about the Muslim ban, the big fear that many Christians have in this country is that Sharia law is about to be imposed. And that's driving a lot of the fear that we have with Muslims. It's fake news. We're nowhere near that. It's not happening, but it's a conspiracy theory that's out there. And, it's really problematic.
And the root cause of that conspiracy theory, apart from free-floating fear, many close-knit Muslim immigrant communities would like such a thing. Right. That's to be expected. But as long as our system holds true, it's not going to do that. Right. And as you know, what muddies it a little too, in certain closed Jewish communities, they allow them to have Jewish church law, but it doesn't supersede civil law. It just it's sort of a localized application, that they let that community apply that.
Right. So and that's consistent with religious freedom.
Yeah. So from your view, you were happy to talk about conspiracies. Where is it going? What's the conspiracy thought?
I don't know where it's going, but I think it's going to create a whole host of problems for us going forward. If we don't have you know, a news source that we find reliable, we are in trouble.
It's recorded that Jesus' disciples came to him, I'm sure on more than one occasion, and they said, "Tell us, when will these things be?" It's a natural question. And Jesus gave quite a long answer, a litany of last day events. Might as well be the headlines for today. But he says the end is not yet, because before the end comes, there needs to be a great persecution. There needs to be a great falling away. There needs to be every man against his brother. A total meltdown and a total revelation of God's character. It's worth keeping that in mind as we live through these cataclysmic 21st century events. I think it's arguably 1 minute to midnight. But time is with the Lord, and how long that minute truly lasts, we will yet see. But let's make it our business to make sure that God is truly with us and that we are inspired by His Spirit and strengthened to endure those days, otherwise through which no flesh will survive. This is Lincoln Steed for Liberty Insider.